Good morning, everybody. Welcome to 10 with Tim. It is Tuesday. It is a beautiful day, and I'm glad that you're with me. We are going verse by verse through the Word of God. We are in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20. Ezekiel's not easy, but it's worth it. So let's dig right in. Chapter 20 is different, as if we needed something else different in Ezekiel. It's different even for Ezekiel. Now notice at the beginning of verse 1 in chapter 20, we get another timestamp. Ezekiel is good for these. We got the first one, of course, in the very beginning, chapter 1, verse 1, I guess, where we're told the exact year. And literally, we can combine that with ancient calendars and get a pretty good idea of the exact date, which is interesting. He does again in chapter 8, which is just about a year's passage. And then here again in chapter 20, another year. So we're coming on the second year now of Ezekiel's ministry. He's very prolific. He's gotten a lot done in 2 years, but on he goes. Now at the beginning of chapter 20, once more the leaders of Israel come together. Now it's not like they're from Israel. It's not like a contingent, a group has come down to get a message from the Lord. That's not what has happened at all. These are just probably ad hoc committee leaders in exile there with Ezekiel, but they come to inquire of the Lord. Now, understand, they're not just here to get a general message. That's not how it would work. In Ezekiel's day, it wasn't assumed that the average person, even the average believer, didn't have access to the whole, the spirit or the knowledge that would come from, special knowledge from God. A prophet was necessary for that. And so they've come probably with a particular question in mind. They've come to inquire of the Lord. They have a question. So when it says, I'm not going to give you a message. You're not going to inquire of me. Obviously, they get a message. So it's not that God is refusing to speak to them. He's just refusing to answer the, whatever question they've come with. It's not even worth, recording the question because that's not how it works. Now, all through the Old Testament, they're told to seek the Lord, seek the Lord and he will be found. But the implication is you seek him only, And throughout the book of Ezekiel, throughout Ezekiel's preaching, it's a terrible revelation is that these leaders of Israel, in fact, all the nation of Israel, that they have this secret idolatry. They seem to seek the Lord. They want to inquire of the Lord, but they always have an idol in their pocket. Now let's talk about that because it's very important. Ezekiel chapter 20 is not one of these enacted prophecies. It's not a parable or a riddle as we've seen before. No, this is straight history. They come to God and God just turns right back around and clobbers them with their own history. And it sadly is this contradictory history of covenant with God, but then secret idolatry or not so secret idolatry. You and I have a hard time understanding the enticement, the entanglement of idolatry for God's people in the ancient world, but let me just try to explain some of this to you as I understand it. Idolatry in the ancient world was pretty much universal. The fact that the Old Testament, that the ancient people of God would say that God is spirit and therefore must be worshiped with no idols, the 10 Commandments. That it sounds insane in the ancient world because idolatry was, as I say, was universal. Everybody used idols in their worship of whatever pagan gods they were seeking out. The idea behind it is, I guess, what you would call sympathetic magic. Remember, I just think back at old TV shows where there would be a witch doctor with a voodoo doll, right? And make a doll. Like there's an episode of Gilligan's Island, right? When there was this witch doctor and he made little dolls of all of the 7 castaways. Here's Gilligan and the skipper and professor. And, if he stuck a pin in Gilligan's doll, right? Gilligan would feel that, right? It was the magic, the sympathetic magic. In other words, that little doll of Gilligan, as crude as it was, it somehow captured something of Gilligan's essence, And so it didn't matter if it was a high quality doll or not. It It's just the fact that it was an image meant it captured something of his essence. I remember when we had the Amish come and take down our old building years ago. We wanted to take pictures of that, but they asked us not to take pictures of them. The Amish believe that if you are captured in a photograph, that captures something of your soul. It's the same kind of idea, that you can capture the essence of a person, or in the case of idolatry, you can capture something of the essence of the God in an image. And that's why having an idol made so much sense in the ancient world. If you've captured something of the essence of, it doesn't matter how crude the idol is, how poorly fashioned, you've done it. You've captured something of the God's essence, which means if you have the idol, you've got something of that God always with you. So you have a shrine in your house, you pray to the idol, and the God has to listen because you've got him, captured in the idol. Something of his essence is there. And so the idol gave you assurance that the God was present with you and that the God could hear you, the God could see you. You understand? And so for that reason, when the Jews, had this revelation from the only true God, that you don't worship the true God with an idol, that you don't need an idol to pray to, that you don't need an idol to know that God is with you, that God protects you, that he sees, that he hears, that he knows. You understand? That's absolutely, it sounds insane from a perspective of the ancient world in which idol worship is universal. So the Jews are alone in this. They're the only ones who believe this. And again, they're surrounded with this assumption that you need an idol. That's why even, in the story of the Exodus, when Aaron makes the golden calf and he says that we're going to use this calf and we're going to have a celebration to Yahweh, he was still trying to say, hey, this calf is Yahweh. This is the one that brought you out of Egypt. It's just it's just this entanglement with that idea that you need an idol, and so Aaron made an idol, called it Yahweh, but you can't do that, from the perspective of Yahweh, from the only true God. This is not how he's worshiped. So Ezekiel chapter 20 is this long history lesson, and it goes through the generations, 3 generations here. The generation coming out of Egypt, and the commandment as a part of the covenant is you got to leave the idols of Egypt behind. But as it turns out, the idols of Egypt are the idols of Israel now. They carry them with them. And then it goes into the wilderness generation. They continue to break the Sabbath. They continue to worship idols. And then after that generation, their children after them. And again, Ezekiel's just going right through the history. And then once they get into the promised land and they're living in the land of Canaan, maybe now they'll be faithful to the covenant. Maybe now they'll honor God's name. Maybe now they'll forsake the idols. But no, in the land of Canaan, in the promised land, they just live like Canaanites. They adopt the idolatry of the Canaanites. They sacrifice their children. I mean, it's unthinkable to us. But again, if you're trying to earn like lifelong favor, of a pagan god, then you sacrifice your firstborn. You sacrifice an infant, and that way you seal the deal, right? You got lifelong favor. God says no, no. But along the way, this whole rehearsal of their history is just this unbroken story of grace and forgiveness. God said, I was going to smite them. I was going to wipe them out. But no, I made a covenant. I made a covenant. God made a covenant with an unfaithful partner. The people will never be faithful. They continue to prostitute, themselves with idols, with pagan gods. But God is going to protect his own name. God's going to be true to his own name. God refuses to erase them, even though they've broken the covenant with him. God remains faithful when his people are unfaithful. So again, it's this story of grace and forgiveness. It comes down to verse 39. It's the invitation, right? It's the come to Jesus moment. It's the application when he says, I ask for you, people of Israel, go ahead, worship your idols, but you need to know one thing. God's going to be faithful. And so God's going to be faithful to Israel. And so even in exile, he's going to purify his people and he's going to bring them home. So in the course of this rehearsal of the history, notice how God continues to keep alive in his people this desire to be in the land that he's promised them. He says, I'm going to bring you home. A purified Israel will be resettled and restored to live in Palestine, in the land that God has promised them, that God will bring them back. So at the end of this sermon, at the end of this history lesson, there is this promise of this second Exodus, that's going to bring God's people back into the land. Now, starting in verse 45, understand, he says, and then a message came to me. This is the beginning of another round of messages, another round of sermons. And verse 45 connects importantly to chapter 21, where we'll be tomorrow. But understand, this image of this forest fire, it's a parable, it's an allegory, and it really represents, approaching armies from the south. It's not literally a forest fire, but the fire represents war. The fire represents judgment and advancing armies coming from the south. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Chapter 21, verses 1 to 32. That's where we'll be tomorrow. So enjoy your Tuesday. I got a busy day walking into staff meeting right now. I love the team here at Woodburn, those who I'm blessed to serve alongside. Pray for us as we try to serve the Lord and serve our church well. And then a full afternoon. I love you all so much. Thanks for being faithful to the word. Thanks for allowing me to be your friend and partner in the word. I love you, and I'll see you in the morning.